So as Reverend Heng Sure has just presented in our panel today, during the first part of our shared session today, we've talked very much about filiality and how we can bring it into our day-to-day lives. What I brought up here in front of us today is sort of a panel of speakers coming from a variety of different backgrounds. So we have monastic, non-monastic, we have working professionals, we have students, we have male and female. And we're here to discuss about how we take these principles and take this to our day-to-day lives, where the rubber quite literally hits the road. It's one thing to have these principles, but it's quite another to have that conversation with that father, with that mother, especially if there's some baggage that's accumulated along the way, to have that first conversation and to pick up that phone. So what I'd like to do today is sort of have this sort of panel share some of their experiences for how they dealt with their family, how they dealt with their community, how they engaged and brought these principles to life in the cultivation of these Buddhist practices. So I'd like to start off with a quick introduction from our new panel of presenters. Again, my name is James Nguyen. I'll be helping to moderate this sort of panel discussion. So my background is that I'm a working professional. I currently work for a large technology company. I try to sit and meditate every day. But as the Reverend Heng Sure has presented, sitting is only part of the question. It's another for me to have these development of my own personal character and how that affects how I practice these Buddhist cultivation. Just a quick introduction, please, from everyone on the panel.
I thought I was going to get 40 minutes. So my name is Sandy, and I am a substitute teacher in high school in Silicon Valley in California, specifically in the city of Cupertino. So my students are children of Dell, HP, Apple, Google, and Kaiser Permanente.
Hello, my name is Angela Justice. I'm the Director of University Relations for Dharma Realm Buddhist University, and I oversee outreach to prospective students and also reach out to the community.
Hello, I am Fedde de Vries, originally from the Netherlands. I recently obtained an MA in Buddhist Studies, one could say, at UC Berkeley, and I'm currently a visiting scholar at Dharma Realm Buddhist University, work on translating Buddhist texts.
Hi, my name is Yuen-Lin, originally from Malaysia. I've been in the US since 2000 for college, and then went to college in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Then came out to the Silicon Valley area where I worked in technology in software for about 10 years. And then recently I started a master's program at Dharma Realm Buddhist University in Buddhist classics.
My name is Jin Chuan. I was actually born in New Jersey and moved to the Bay Area when I was 3 years old. And I grew up pretty normal, and at one point in my life, I decided to become a monastic to the surprise of my mom. So maybe that might be a story I could share later about filiality, because that was definitely quite a journey there. And but pretty much, I moved to the monastery to live there and help out in about 2005 after I finished college, and stayed there and started the monastic training with the monk to my left, Dharma Master Jin-He, in 2011, and became a full ordained monk in 2013. And currently, I'm actually also a university student again at Dharma Realm Buddhist University in the Buddhist Classics program. So, learning some more Dharma.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jin-He, and I was born in Malaysia, but I've been in California for the past seven or 8 years. And how the bridge between Chinese Buddhism and American Buddhism or Western Buddhism actually came from Malaysia to be a monk in America. So that's kind of backwards, sideways, forwards.
All right, thank you very much. We unfortunately only have one microphone, so we'll be doing a little bit of shuffling as part of this panel. So Jin Chuan Sure, you sort of opened up the discussion by sharing that story. So Jin Chuan Sure and I actually both attended Stanford together at different times, but as he seems to have decided to return back to school after, again, sort of in a sense, leaving the home life and becoming a monastic. Would you like to sort of start with that story, please?
Okay, I'll try to keep it really short because this could definitely take a long time. But basically, at end of high school, I became very interested in becoming a monk because I think at that age in life, there's a feeling of when you look out, at the world and you go, what's what's the world really like and what's going on? I remember at that time I was presented with the kind of problems that I think this parliament's really talking about, like the environmental damage that's happening, the kind of rampant consumerism, all those kind of values. And this was maybe in 2000. So I don't think it was even as strong then, but I really felt it pretty deep in my heart. And I didn't want to be part of the problem. And I thought, well, looking at my lifestyle, growing up in the Bay Area, I'm actually using up a lot of things. And so I was looking for something that I felt was meaningful as a path in life, and I found monastic life. It just kind of
Merton.
yeah, Thomas Merton. Thomas Merton was a big influence. So actually, it's the kind of a joke is I first want to be a monk, and when I told my mother, to her great distress, so I'm not sure if I want to be a Catholic monk or a Buddhist monk, but I know I want to be a monk. But I remember going home one day after seeing a video on a Trappist monastery, a Catholic monastery, and then coming home to my mom very excited, saying, I found the purpose of my life, found what I want to do with my life, and I told her, I want to be a monk. And I could see her face just drop. And that started about 2 or 3 years where we had a very tense relationship where every time she pretty much saw me, she was very upset because I was doing something that she knew nothing about. I didn't grow up with like a particularly Buddhist family. And so it was something that was really off track in terms of what was appropriate or what made sense or what she felt safe about, because she was somebody who I think really looked to my future and wanted to make something good. And I remember, so just to make the story fairly quick, because I think it's a lot of people here, but one of the major pivotal points of me shifting my own orientation actually came from coming to Berkeley Buddhist Monastery, and actually having a fairly a good conversation with Reverend Heng Sure, in fact, where I was basically really want to be a monk. And I don't know if people know the story of the Buddha's life, right? The Buddha's life story about him becoming a monk. And oftentimes in the West, he's kind of presented as like the rebel saint. I was just reading one of the books by Houston Smith, one of the chapters of the Buddha's life. He's the rebel saint. You know, he goes against his parents' wishes, forges his own way, and finds a spiritual, his spiritual awakening. And I have to say that was kind of my narrative, being a young Westerner, is you're forging your own path, and this is like what we're supposed to do as in the West. And so I remember talking to Reverend Heng Sure, saying, I really want to be a monastic. What should I do? And he said, listen to your mom more. And I was like, what? How does that make it? She doesn't want me a monk, wanted me to be a monk. And so I remember going home and thinking about that, going, this makes no sense. But I thought about it, and then I remember there was one of these books, these kind of Chinese virtue books that's in the monastery that I picked up, and it outlines, like step by step, what it means to be a good son. And it's really like traditional values. And I remember the first line in it was basically, when your parents call, respond immediately. And I was like, wow, maybe I'll try that one. Just try that one. And so I tell the kids when I'm with the high school kids or the elementary school kids, if you want to change your relationships the fastest with your family, is that line. If you can, every single time they call you, you put down what you're doing immediately and respond to their needs. I promise you, you won't get any nagging, because you're immediately doing whatever they want you to do. And actually what happens is they actually see that you're prioritizing their needs over your own. And what that does is when you have something important to say, they pay attention. And for me, that made a huge difference. So after, I'd say it took quite a while, 13 years, and she became, I think, very supportive of me becoming a monastic, largely because I realized, I didn't have to.
You see, it worked.
It worked. It worked. To my great amazement. I thought it would be impossible and just have to walk my own path or something. But in the end, I realized it was a really wholesome journey, and my mom is very supportive, and we have conversations together, and she's also picked up a lot of the meaning. Just a quick story. Also, I see her changing as well, because before she said, whenever I go out with my friends, you're just a real big embarrassment. Because her friends go out before, you're going they're doing this, and all her friends are going getting a job, doing things that are successful in society. And says, and when it comes to you, I can't say anything. You're going to a monastery, and that's all you're doing. And so, but later she said, I don't know about those gatherings. I go to those gatherings, they're kind of not that meaningful. All we do is gossip about our kids and compare our kids. I think I want to dedicate my time to something more meaningful. And so she's been working on the school board for about, I think, 16 years now. So she's put her energy in that.
Thank you for sharing that, Jin Chuan. I know for a lot of us, though, we're still dealing with parents who still may be in that first stage, we haven't quite in the 13 years of getting past the mouth being sort of agape. I know there's some other stories in the panel for how some people have sort of dealt with some of these conversations with their family. Yuen-Lin, would you like to share as well?
Okay, so I think one thing on reflection is that, to me, my relationship with my parents seems to be one which is probably the most challenging, you could say, the most complex, but also probably the most important in terms of spiritual cultivation. And it's certainly taught me a lot and allowed me to really apply whatever principles we learn through the Dharma, through Buddhism, apply them in a real way and see the result, actually observe the result. So I'll just talk maybe briefly about one aspect, which is James earlier mentioned this issue of emotional baggage. So I think one thing that makes parent-child relationships complex is the amount of stuff that has happened over the years, growing up as their child and going through various challenges, and that role changing over the years. I think there's a great build-up of stuff, for lack of a better word. And the result of this, actually, I realize, is that we, at least for myself, oftentimes I think I didn't see my parents for who they were in the present moment, the fullness of their being, but I kind of saw them through a filter, through this filter of all that emotional baggage that had built up. Some examples come to mind. My parents live in Malaysia, which is a long way away. It's like a 20-hour journey from the U.S. And my mom comes to visit from time to time. So there came a point when my mom is very kind of good at house, kind of keeping the house in good shape, unlike myself. So I would notice that during her visits, the first she would sometimes stay for many weeks, more than a month sometimes. And initially things would be okay. But then I would notice that as time went by, there would be this kind of tension building up, and I would get more easily annoyed or frustrated at little things. It wasn't even anything in particular she did, but just this sense of okay, why do you fuss about this or that? And communication would become a bit more touchy. But I would realize that almost immediately after she left back to Malaysia, it's like the complete emotional tone would change, and suddenly I would realize, like, wow, all these good things she did while she was here, I would notice them and remember them and feel like a great remorse, actually, for like, how come when she was here, somehow this was like such a barrier that I couldn't see all these things, and I was so focused on the negative. So another example is probably a very common situation which we all face, is difficult conversations with our parents. So with my dad, there was one day when whatever the topic was, but I kind of, maybe you could say, lost it for a bit, and I raised my voice at him, and he actually didn't get mad, but he actually just walked away quietly. Until this day, actually, when that image comes up in my mind, I feel like a great, this also a great sense of remorse, that at having done something hurtful to him, but. In the aftermath of that, I think basically I had the choice of, okay, can I just like hold on to that feeling of anger and bring that into the future by just being cold to him, right? Or just keeping quiet, avoiding him, which is, I'm sure we all have done that at times. Or can I kind of apply, so to speak, the principle of impermanence or the principle of emptiness, that all emotions, even negative emotions, they aren't really real and fixed in that sense. They aren't really solid. And the only thing that makes them real and solid is when we when we hold on to them and refuse to let them go. So in that particular instance, I was actually able to kind of, okay, even though this is uncomfortable, I'm going to make a gesture of peace. So I say, Dad, I'm sorry that I raised my voice, blah, blah, blah. And then again, there was that you could really feel that there was just an immediate turn to where something which could have become a protracted, long, kind of tension between us immediately just disappeared. And he was like, oh, it was totally nothing. No, don't worry about it. Pat each other on the back, in the way that guys do. And everything was back to normal. So these are just some examples, I think, that really illustrate how I can observe Dharma principles in action, and where I can do the often difficult and uncomfortable work of actually putting them to the test.
Thanks, Yuen-Lin. I guess speaking of some of those uncomfortable conversations, Angela, I know you've had some conversations with your own parents as you sort of started cultivating more.
You want me to tell you about some of my uncomfortable conversations? Let me see. I think that many of us find that our relationship with our parents is one of the relationships that takes the most energy and attention in our lives. And I have a particularly complex relationship with my mother, who I've both been very close to and very distant from, depending on kind of what was happening in our lives. And I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, went to college in Massachusetts, was very interested in learning more about Buddhism in college. When I went to college, I went to study economics and mathematics. I thought I was going to go into consulting or finance when I graduated. And about my junior year of college, I realized that I wasn't going to go to Wall Street. I had no interest. And so I went to the Career Center, and they asked me what I wanted to do when I graduated. And they said, what do you love to do? I said, I love to drink tea and meditate. And they said, we think you should look into the tea business. So I did, and I came to Berkeley to do an internship and to work for a couple of tea companies, and then when it was time for me to graduate, my mother said, "Well, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go?" And I said, "I think I'm going to move to Berkeley." And she said, "Well, why do you want to move to Berkeley?" I said, I want to move to Berkeley so I can be normal." She said, "What does normal mean?" I said, "Drink tea and meditate." She was not happy with this answer, not very happy at all. She thought I was, on very solid ground, and I was going to go have a good career in business. And I actually worked with tea for many years. But so I came to Berkeley. I had been practicing meditation in college. I actually took classes on Buddhism in college, and that was where I found out about the City of 10,000 Buddhas and Dharma Realm Buddhist Association. And shortly after I moved to Berkeley, I met Reverend Heng Sure. And I was very excited to meet him because I had read about his pilgrimage, 3 Steps, 1 Bow for peace. And in my first conversation with him, I wanted to talk about some of the texts I'd been reading and about meditation. And the first thing he asked me is, "How well do you get along with your mother?"
Just a one-note monk, By the way, how well do you get along with your mom? I wanted to ask all of you that. No.
At that time, we actually weren't speaking at all because I had moved to Berkeley and she was not very happy with that. And so I've had that relationship has been a work in progress. And one of the interesting things is that being a part of this group and practicing together is that I actually have, over the years, made my mother a priority. And I followed Reverend Heng Sure's advice, which was to start reaching out to her regularly and having conversations, even when they were uncomfortable. And even though sometimes we still have differences of opinions, I find that she is very readily available, and I usually talk to her a couple times a week now.
Thank you for sharing that, Angela. So you said that you previously were in a path more for finance or within business, and actually Jin-He was actually within business before he became a monastic. So Jin-He, could you share a bit about that, as well as how that evolution sort of came to be within the context of filiality?
So as everyone was relating the experiences, I was thinking to myself, I hope the time comes up quickly, because I feel like I'm in the wrong panel. That's because my relationship with my parents have been normal. Although by now you know that normal isn't quite normal for all of us over here. I have a joke with my mom. I say that you know how to push all my buttons because you created all of them. She doesn't like that joke. Actually, being wanting to repay the kindness of my parents was the main reason why I became a monk, because I read through our teachers. One of the things that he said was that this is one of the best things that you can do if you want to repay your parents' kindness. So I know James phrased the question as from my background in business. All I can say is that I had a list, kind of like a bucket list, but this was more like a professional list, a job list. Like all the things I wanted to do by a certain age. And I think I was in my late 20s or early 30s where I had ticked all of them. And I realized that all those things I thought in life that was going to bring me happiness did not work at all. None of them. I didn't have to worry about certain things in life, and I was really fortunate because of that. But it didn't make me happy at all, having all those things. So, and it seemed like the only thing I had left was to that this was the only right thing to do. And so it was kind of both repaying the kindness of my parents. Another way also was to get myself out of trouble, because when you're young and you have a lot of time and you have, say, the resources to do anything you want, it's really easy to do a lot of stupid stuff. Yeah, and to get yourself, if you're not careful, to just get yourself in a bind, like a whirlpool, just brings you deeper and deeper and deeper. It just takes control over your life. And I was heading in that direction. So if it wasn't for the lifestyle that I'm leading right now, I would probably be in a very dark place and lying to myself every time I see myself in the mirror, and going deeper in that direction, trying to get out, but not understanding that I was just going deeper. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you, Jin-He. And finally, Sandy, I know hey, that's right. Fedde? I know, Fedde, I know your parents are a little bit farther away from here, so it takes a little bit more to sort of call home to the Netherlands. So please tell us about that.
Well, thanks to people like you in the tech world, we have Skype nowadays. Well, one thing that came to mind in the context of difficult relationships, and I might be saying a slightly unorthodox thing, is, so one thing that I've been really, really grateful for in learning Buddhism throughout the years. I started in my early teens learning Buddhism and encountered the teachings of this tradition very early on. And filiality was emphasized, so I made sure that I paid attention to my relation with my parents and with my grandparents as well. And but with my dad, for a long time, our personalities are probably very much the same. So we rub each other the wrong way oftentimes, and he, always seems to have quite a few reservations about me living the kind of life that I do, and all this Buddhism stuff is kind of weird.
You might mention that your father is a Lutheran pastor.
No, that's a friend of his.
That's a friend of
My
yours. Your
dad
father's
is a
doctor.
pediatrician.
Okay, I met them both. One is the pastor, one is the doctor. Your dad's a doctor.
Yeah.
Good.
But then some of the things actually in our relationship shifted last summer when I learned to disagree with him. And I think that was actually because I realized I'd been reading some of these Chinese texts. So this is kind of an example of Chinese Dharma coming to the West, and I might be slightly unorthodox, and I hope people will point out, how this is different across cultures. But when I was hearing filial respect for, years after years, I had this image of respect being, very obedient, very kind. And then last summer, in talking to my father, there was, certain family things happening, and I started realizing he actually really likes it if I act like an adult and speak with him as if I am a person, rather than being afraid of him and trying to say things that will always please him. He actually really likes it when I engage in dialogue and say things that, might be from a slightly different perspective, and he can then engage in, and we can actually have a conversation. And that's actually been really fun, and and we've been opening up in different ways to each other. And he's actually been making kind of kind jokes about Buddhism now, rather than kind of slightly ironic jokes. And our conversations feel much more fruitful in both ways. So that's, and it's because it's also made me much more comfortable in hearing what he has to say and has to give me in terms of advice. And so I find myself much more comfortable also going for advice to him. For example, with tax issues, where his advice has been really helpful. So those were a few reflections, I think.
Thank you, Fedde. And now, Sandy, you share as well?
Of course, give me the mic. So, like I said, I work with teenagers, and we were talking about pushing buttons. Teenagers are just as good as knowing your button as soon as they see you. I'm a substitute teacher, so I show up in 5 schools in 1 district, and literally they don't know me, but they know my buttons as soon as, like within 30 seconds, they smell it. So I want to address earlier, the first half, the monks talked about Guanyin Bodhisattva, and I want to touch on the Bodhisattva path. My understanding of it is that when you heal others, in turn you're getting the same healing. When you help others, it's the same as helping yourself. When you save others, you are essentially saving yourself. And the resistance in getting involved and getting engaged is following a blind, hidden agenda of self-sabotage and self-destruction. That sounds cool, right? Well, when applied, when I have discussions like that with other people in communities or even in family, it sounds great. But when applied, everybody's got a special, unique situation. And they'll say, oh, Sandy, let me tell you. No, that person is, well, I would love to get involved. I would love to, of course, want to, heal this part about me or, help that person with their situation, their drama. But let me tell you, blah, 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 blah. And this person is, no, you don't understand. And out goes the actual, appliance are putting this into action. And it's really hard to say, as a third person, it's really hard to say, I heard the world as a mirror that reflects what is within, that screams for healing, resolution, of which we are in denial of. As a third person, that's easy to say. And it's hard to apply when you are in that situation, as most people agree.
Okay.
Thanks, Sandy. Now, Reverend Heng Sure, you previously walked through Sila, Samadhi, and Prajna, sort of character, concentration, and insight. And one of the key things that I wanted to sort of highlight as part of this discussion about filiality is this concept of character. And a lot of that within Buddhism is through precepts, through, in a sense, different guidelines that we use and apply to our day-to-day lives. Now, many of the people here in this panel have taken precepts of different shapes and forms. Some have taken monastic precepts, others have taken different sets of precepts. And I'd like to have some of the panelists share some of their experiences with the precepts, and in a sense, how they sort of apply to filiality. Yuen-Lin, would you like to start a bit on, I guess, the Bodhisattva precepts that you've taken?
Do you want to say
Or Fedde, that works too.
Because I was thinking beforehand of a story that's related to this and to filiality, which is so in the Buddhist tradition there's a precept, the fifth of the 5 basic precepts, sort of is against drinking alcohol or abusing any type of intoxicant. And I actually remember, being about 15-year-old and having conversations with my parents. This is in the Netherlands, and where the legal age for drinking alcohol is definitely much lower than here. And they were advising me to, go out with friends and drink alcohol and have fun, like normal kids do. And I was very much not enchanted by that idea. But then a little gift of the universe was that my dad, being a pediatrician, there was a sort of wave in the Netherlands of children who would come into the hospital comatized, like in coma, by drinking too much alcohol. And the youngest ages would even be 12 years old. And there's a dramatic alcohol culture among youth, and they would abuse it and really damage their lives with it. I mean, what it does to the brain is quite amazing in a negative sense. So my dad actually became one of the main people from the medical field in our state or province in the Netherlands to be involved with that, and was actually the one who would appear on regional television to tell people about how bad alcohol is for you. So a couple of years after he was telling me about how I should drink alcohol, very quickly he was actually on the other side of the spectrum, telling many children how great it was if they wouldn't drink alcohol. So he ended up being actually very supportive of my practice. So my stubbornness kind of bore fruit, perhaps in some way.
Okay, so I think, so if people aren't familiar with precepts, so precepts in Buddhism, I guess one could draw an analogy to commandments, although they're not quite exactly the same. And in precepts in Buddhism, the one which I feel applies very often to interpersonal relationships is the precept on against false speech, which also includes harsh speech. I think the precept serves both as a safety net in terms of setting some kind of boundary that we don't cross, right, in interpersonal relations. But it also is also really helpful as a tool of, you could say, like a tool of mindfulness, by making us pay closer attention to what we say and the character, how we're saying it, not just what we say, but how we're saying it, the tone of voice, and so on. It becomes a really useful tool in actual moment-by-moment practice. Actually, in our tradition, besides precepts, there's also something called the 6 principles that we try and practice. And the first one, which I've been working on a fair bit, is not non-contention or not fighting. And this very much, I think, came out of just having these experiences where, for whatever reason, I would, express anger or speak harshly, and that set up a whole chain of painful consequences, and just getting really tired of that, coming to the point where basically I've just had enough, of this, and wanting to just actually draw a line where no matter what the situation, I am going to try and put this into practice. So that has been of great value in personal relationships, but also with parents. To address the original question of the Bodhisattva precepts, so the 5 precepts in Buddhism, you could say, are more of the spirit of refraining from unskillful or harmful action. But in the Bodhisattva precepts, there are also a number of precepts which actually prescribe action or suggest that it would be very good to act in certain ways, not just refrain from certain actions. And actually I think it's the first minor precept, right, in the lay Bodhisattva precepts is, it's phrased as against failure to make offerings to one's parents, teachers, and elders. But to translate that maybe into like real English is basically to not forget to take care and provide for them, and and take good care of them. That has been actually how does actually one put that into practice? Opens up a lot of really room for reflection. How do I actually, what does it mean to take care of my parents? What does it mean to not neglect? And what does it mean to provide for them sufficiently? And maybe I'll leave the room open for others to comment on that.
Please, I'd also like to hear from one of the monastics, and if one of them had any particular thoughts and how their monastic precepts have been brought to their lives.
Maybe I just want to add something to what Yuen-Lin said about what precepts are. I think maybe one thing that's important to look at it is I think you can think about precepts as vows. So basically, you make a vow that I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to do this. So what Yuen-Lin just mentioned about one of the vows is I vow to always take care of my parents, teachers, and elders. And if you really think about it, that's a fairly serious vow. And in Buddhism, you remember that on a fairly regular basis as part of the training for it. And so my experience with Buddhism in terms of this particular set of the practices is that it has a really complete set of tools for learning how to be a good person. And it's not just like, how to be a good person is a very abstract idea, just be good. It's like, so this is how you be good in your actions with your body, with your actions with your mouth, with your actions in your mind. What are you actually intending to do? And then if you catch yourself doing something that's not really skillful, how do you go about changing it? And so in my experiences in Buddhism is basically the meditations has helped me see my faults much more clearly, see where my shortcomings are. But rather than you say, you don't see them in a way that's really negative. What's faults? You don't see them in a negative light. You see them in a very joyful light. I kind of take Buddhist practice almost like playing a video game sometimes, because I have a video game background, or playing sports, playing basketball. And when you're playing basketball and you're learning a new skill, you're playing sports, you're bouncing the basket, you're learning to dribble. And if you don't learn to dribble very well, you just practice more. So same thing with our conduct. If I don't have very skillful, I said something that's not very skillful, I hurt somebody's feelings, I see their reaction to me, I get kind of self-righteous about something. Actually, one of the things I catch in my mind is whenever I think I am right, I have a thought, I am right, I really just go, what, something is wrong. Why am I thinking I am right? Something must be wrong in my mind if I have that thought. And so I go back a step and try to reflect on what's going on. And so I find that the precepts, in the monastic tradition, the monks, we have 250 precepts that form the basis of our lives. And that gives us a structure whereby we interact with one another through. And it creates a community that's been going on for over 2,000 years, 2,500 years since the Buddha's time, and still going strong. And my feeling about it is that it's this groundedness in a wholesome life that's dedicated towards goodness and awakening. And that's, as I said in the beginning, why I was so drawn to it, because I could see that I could live a life that was based on wholesome virtues and values. And sometimes when I was in society, just that time I didn't know so much about the Buddhist lay life so much, but when I was just out in the world watching the normal way life went, I could see that the values of society seemed very fleeting. It was like, it's kind of like sometimes you try to do good, and sometimes things go, you just compete to get by over here, or you're a little bit greedy over there, and it didn't have that solidity. And so what I found with the precepts is that it's self-chosen. It's not that the Buddha says, you shall do this. It's like, if you so choose to practice this way, this will be very helpful on your path. And then if you want to, you can make that commitment. I vow to not kill. I vow to not steal. I vow to not to say lies. I vow not to drink alcohol. and vow not to commit sexual misconduct. So there's kind of things that you can take with your actual body, speech, and mind that help you along in the path. So, yeah.
I just wanted to add that my understanding of the precepts has now evolved to mean a way of living your life, and people here of different faiths, you will find it in your own faith, a way of life or the wisdom or the teachings. It's just the foundation of our happiness. The best way I can put it is that's the secret of being happy. Without those, it is very, very difficult to have a balanced life and to have a positive effect on the people around you.
Just real quick, because the one thing I just wanted to point out was we were talking about the vertical relationship a lot, about parents and kids. I just want to point out there's a horizontal relationship right here among us. Like we've actually been practicing together a long time, and I've learned from the lay community as much as people around me. And there's a mutual support that happens as Dharma friends. That's a little bit different than just a normal friendship. We're looking out for each other in a very different way. So I just want to point that out.
Can I add something? Yeah, just to add one thing real quick is that I think in the process of applying all these tools, whether it's the principles or the precepts, and I think over time the combination of applying all these tools, moment by moment, I think the result of it is actually a visible transformation in like the character of the relationship, for example, between me and my parents. Whereas I think maybe in time ago, I guess I don't quite recall how, I can't really describe very well how it was, but definitely in the recent past, I feel that there's more of a genuine respect. There's more of like a genuine warmth and a tenderness, which is kind of hard to put into words. But it seems to me that it's affection that's coming from a deeper place. It's not a place of obligation, and it's not a place of just plain responsibility, but it's actually coming from a place that is connecting with them at a more fundamental human level, which was made possible by actually putting all these tools into practice kind of day by day. So I think we're kind of in a Chan or Zen session. And there is a principle, if I recall correctly, it's I think in the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch. The principle is that as the afflictions or the defilements, right, all these states when our mind is taken over by negative emotions of various sorts, as those lessen, then actually the wisdom of our original mind, of our inherent nature, manifests by itself. We don't actually need to do anything to acquire or to add that. Just by lessening the afflicted states of mind, our inherent wisdom manifests by itself because it's inseparable from our nature. So I think this ties into into what's going on in this process.
I just had a small thought to add. In addition to kind of on the nature of the horizontal relationships, is that when you take precepts and you vow to restrain yourselves from certain actions, it also helps you have very harmonious relationships with those around you. So it's a very good foundation for a community practice, because you can trust that the people next to you are not going to harm you in any way. You feel naturally much safer.
Thank you for that. I'd like to thank all our panelists for sort of sharing their thoughts of how they've been able to apply a lot of these principles to sort of these day-to-day lives. It's often where we have to bring these practices to with our relationships with our family that we really have to take this and bring it to life. Reverend Heng Sure, do you have any sort of final thoughts?
I do. Thank you all very much for spending this time with us. And if folks maybe this is not what you expected to hear when you came to a panel on Zen and Chan, right? But we're reflecting the 40th year of absorbing the teachings of a Chan Buddhist monk, Master Hsuan Hua, who is the Dharma heir of Master Empty Cloud, who was also the grand teacher of Master Ming-Hai. And this is what we've come to. If we say, where is the spirit of these 20th and 21st century Chan Buddhist pilgrims, I have to say it's being explored here, Dharma Realm Buddhist University, in a real lively way. I'd like to send people here, if you're curious to find out more, drbu.org. Upcoming events. The goal of this is making scholar practitioners, people who understand their own mind, who can put it into practice, those understandings in the world. So there's a lot to learn here. If you're curious, please do explore. And this was James's panel, James Nguyen, but I was very taken with everything that I heard. I was very impressed. And, as we go through our first full day of the Parliament, I hope that if you folks, if our paths cross in the hallway or in the next gathering, please stop and ask more questions that we didn't have a chance to open up to all of you. Do not hesitate. We'd love to find out what your interest is in Buddhist meditation or your own spiritual practice, and become expand our community of wholesome friends in the world. I think that's what's going to save our world, actually. So thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
We'll be happy to stay here, the panelists, to answer any questions that we may have from the audience. So thank you very much.
Sure.